In the dry lands of Midian, where the wind moved gently across the sand and the stars lit the night like soft candles in the sky, there lived a young woman named Zipporah. She was one of 7 daughters, born to Jethro, the priest of Midian. Her life was quiet and steady, filled with the rhythms of tending sheep, drawing water, and listening to the wise teachings of her father. She knew the sounds of the desert well, the call of distant birds, the shuffle of hooves, the rustle of tents at night, and she had grown content in that life of stillness. One afternoon, as the sun bent low and golden light spilled across the sands, Zipporah and her sisters guided their sheep to the well. The air was warm, the dust soft beneath their feet, and the sky stretched wide in silence above them. It was the same path they had taken many times before, but something about that day felt different. As they neared the well, their eyes caught sight of a figure standing nearby. He was not one of the usual shepherds. He stood alone, tall and strong, with broad shoulders and a quiet stillness about him. His skin was bronzed from the sun, and his face bore the marks of travel and time, but there was a noble grace in his features. His dark hair fell in waves just above his shoulders, and his eyes, though tired, held a striking depth full of sorrow, strength, and something unspoken. Before they could reach the well, a group of rough shepherds arrived and began to harass them, as they often did. These men pushed and shouted, trying to drive the women away so they could water their own flocks first. The sisters tried to resist, but the men were loud and aggressive. Zipporah held her ground, but fear flickered in her heart. Then the stranger moved. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, placing himself between the women and the shepherds. He didn't shout or boast. His strength was in his calm. With a firm voice and an even firmer presence, he rebuked the men when they tried to approach. Again, he blocked their path. Though he carried no weapon, something in his stance made them retreat. There was a quiet power in him, the kind that could not be easily challenged. Then, with steady arms, he drew water from the well, not just for himself, but for their flocks too. Zipporah watched him closely, her heart unusually still. He looked like an Egyptian, but something deeper was written in his eyes, something wild and wounded, yet deeply good. He was a stranger, yes, but not like any she had ever met. And in the quiet rhythm of water rising from the well, she felt something stirring, though she could not yet name it. When she and her sisters returned home, their father was surprised to see them early. They told him of the man who had helped them. Jethro smiled and said, "Then where is he? Invite him to our home, that he may eat with us." And so they did. The man's name was Moses. He had once lived in Egypt, not just as a citizen, but as a prince. He had grown up in Pharaoh's palace, yet he was not Egyptian by birth. He was Hebrew, and when he saw one of his own people being beaten by an Egyptian, he acted in anger and killed the oppressor. Fearing Pharaoh's wrath, he fled Egypt and wandered through the wilderness, uncertain of his future. Moses accepted Jethro's hospitality and stayed. The weeks turned into months, and during that time, a quiet bond formed between him and Zipporah. He didn't speak much of his past, but she could see the weight he carried. In her presence, he softened, and in his presence, she found strength she hadn't known she needed. In time, her father gave her to Moses in marriage. It was not a royal wedding, not grand or loud, but it was deep and sacred. They built a life together. In the simple tents of Midian, they welcomed their first son and named him Gershom, which meant, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." The name echoed Moses' wandering heart. Later, they had a second son, Eliezer, whose name meant "My God is my help." In the warmth of family, in the laughter of their children, there was peace for a while. But peace does not last forever for the ones chosen by destiny. One day, Moses came home changed. He had climbed the mountain alone and returned with eyes lit by something holy. He told Zipporah about a bush that burned, but was not consumed, about a voice that had spoken from within the fire, and about the name Yahweh, the God of their fathers. That voice had called him to return to Egypt, to confront Pharaoh, and to lead the Hebrew people out of slavery. Zipporah listened in silence. She knew this call would take him far from the safety of their life together. Still, she packed their things, gathered the children, and prepared for the journey. Her love was steady, even when the road was not dot as they traveled toward Egypt. Something strange and terrifying happened one night. Moses became very ill. He collapsed, his skin pale, his breath short. Zipporah felt fear tighten in her chest, and she sensed a darkness over them. She understood then what was wrong. Moses had not circumcised their son. The covenant of their ancestors had not been kept, and this God, this holy fire, did not overlook such things. Without delay, she took a flint knife. Her hands trembled, but her will was strong. She circumcised the boy, touched Moses' feet with the blood, and whispered, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." In that moment, the threat lifted. Moses breathed again. She had saved his life, not with sword or shield, but with obedience, courage, and love. Not long after that, Moses sent her and the children back to Midian. The road ahead was dangerous. Egypt was no place for family. So she returned to her father's tents, watching the man she loved walk into a future filled with plagues and promises, war and wonder. Years passed. News of Moses' work reached Midian. The Nile had turned to blood. Pharaoh's heart had hardened. And then, at last, the slaves had walked free. A sea had opened. A nation had been born. Then one day, her father Jethro came to her and said, "Come, we are going to see Moses." She gathered their sons, and together they made the long journey to the wilderness near Mount Sinai. There, among the rocky cliffs, she saw him again. Moses stood taller than before, his face more worn, but his spirit steady. They embraced without words. He was no longer just her husband. He was the shepherd of a nation. She stayed with him for a time, but her life was never public. She remained in the background, raising their sons, listening to the wind move through the camp, watching the pillar of cloud by day and the fire by night. She had given herself to a man who now belonged to a greater purpose. What became of her afterward is a quiet mystery. Some believe she stayed with Moses until the end. Others say she returned to Midian to live out her days in peace. The scriptures fall silent, and the world does not remember her final days. But God remembers. The woman who watered sheep in the desert, who welcomed a fugitive, who loved a prophet, who saved a leader, who carried the covenant when he could not. She did not part the sea or call down fire. She walked in shadows, but her faith was fierce and her heart faithful. She is the kind of woman history forgets, but heaven remembers. And tonight, as you rest, may her story remind you that even the quiet ones carry greatness. That love can be fierce and gentle at once. That obedience, even in a single moment, can change the course of destiny. Zipporah, the woman by the well, the desert bride, the keeper of covenant. Her story may be finished in silence, but her presence still lingers. Like a warm breeze under the stars, sleep well and let her story stay with you.